Trump just opened the door for Saudi Arabia to enrich uranium. Sounds like a nuclear story, right? Except, I think this is actually the next move in the same game plan I laid out last time, the compute dollar. And if I'm right, there's a car company sitting closer to the center of this than you'd ever guess. On July 21st, President Trump formally approved a 30-year nuclear cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia, what's known as a 123 agreement. Up until now, the only countries the U.S. has ever trusted enough to break its own non-proliferation rules for were France, Germany, the UK, and Japan. Saudi Arabia just joined that list. So why does this video matter to you? Once you understand this one uranium deal, you'll see exactly why Saudi Arabia is pouring money into nuclear power, electric vehicles, and AI data centers all at the same time, and why one specific car company might be sitting at the center of all three. I'm Moon. I obsess over how money and resources get rearranged at the national level. That's the whole game for me. Saudi headlines drop every single day. Nuclear here, EVs there, AI infrastructure somewhere else. And most people never connect them. If that's been frustrating you, this video ties it together. Hit subscribe now, and if this helps, drop a like too. Let's break a myth first. Most people are reading this as Trump sold more weapons to the Middle East. Wrong category entirely. This isn't an arms deal. It's a deal over who controls nuclear material. That's a completely different level of leverage. Here's the actual mechanism. Over the next 2 years, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia will run a joint feasibility study. If enriching uranium on Saudi soil is deemed commercially viable, U.S. companies get to build the enrichment facility. If it's not viable, Saudi Arabia is barred for 10 years from pursuing enrichment on its own or with any other partner. Here's the controversial part. This deal skips the so-called gold standard, the IAEA safeguard that caps enrichment levels and requires intensive inspections. And the scale of it, this deal runs for 30 years, is estimated in the tens of billions of dollars, and is structured so that U.S. companies play the central role while foreign competitors are locked out. So the real question, why Saudi Arabia and why right now? There are 3 reasons. Reason 1, pure economics. Saudi Arabia is about to open a massive nuclear power market, and if the U.S. said no, China or Russia would have taken the whole thing. So, the U.S. opened the door on the condition that American companies like Westinghouse get exclusive rights to supply the reactors and core technology. Reason 2, blocking China and Russia. Over the past 3 to 4 years, China actually helped Saudi Arabia develop 6 to 8 uranium exploration sites in the western part of the country. The U.S. needed to cut that thread. Reason 3, security. With growing concern that Iran is approaching nuclear weapon capability, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has publicly said, if Iran gets a bomb, Saudi Arabia will too. So here's the U.S. calculation. Better to keep Saudi Arabia inside a 30-year agreement the U.S. can manage than risk losing all control and watching Riyadh strike its own deal with someone else. If the story stopped here, it'd just be geopolitics. But here's where it actually gets interesting, because this connects straight back to the compute dollar. In my last video, I laid out how the U.S. is architecting a compute dollar system to replace the petrodollar. AI compute becomes the new oil, but compute needs one thing above everything else to actually run: electricity, and nuclear power is one of the biggest pieces of that electricity puzzle. Here's what most people don't realize. AI data centers eat electricity at an insane scale. A single large AI data center can draw as much power as an entire small city. Saudi Arabia is already chasing massive AI and tech infrastructure projects. Neom, Humane, and the real bottleneck for all of it isn't money, it's power. So here's how I'd read this uranium deal. If Saudi Arabia locks in stable nuclear power, it can run its own AI infrastructure independently. And that means a bigger stake for Saudi Arabia inside the compute dollar system the U.S. is building. Now here's where I want to pull in a thesis I've been building across earlier videos, and I want to be upfront. This next part is not a confirmed fact. This is my own puzzle, my own read on where the pieces are pointing. My thesis is this: Saudi Arabia is trying to make a historic transition from a Petro-State to what I'd call an Electro-State. Not a country that sells oil, but a country that controls electricity itself as leverage. And here's the part I actually want to spend real time on today, because I think this is bigger than people realize. In my read, Lucid Motors isn't positioning itself as a car company. It's positioning itself to sit at the center of an entire electric energy ecosystem. And to explain why that matters, I need to talk about Apple for a second. Think about why Apple isn't just a phone company. Nobody buys one Apple product, they buy into an ecosystem. iPhone talks to your Mac, talks to your AirPods, talks to your watch, backed by services like iCloud and Apple Pay. Once you're in, switching costs go way up, and Apple captures value at every single layer: hardware, software, and recurring services. That's the exact playbook I think Lucid is chasing. Not in phones, in energy. Nuclear and renewable power generates the electricity. Lucid's ESS business, if it develops the way I think it will, stores that electricity. The vehicles, gravity, Earth, cosmos, consume it and put it to work. And the robotaxi layer turns all of that into a recurring mobility service instead of a one-time car sale. Here's what's actually confirmed. Saudi Arabia's PIF-affiliated fund Ayer has invested $550 million into Lucid, and Lucid runs a real manufacturing facility in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And Uber has invested a total of $500 million into Lucid for an 11.5% stake, with a commitment to purchase at least 35,000 vehicles for its robotaxi fleet. Why would Uber make a bet this size? If my ecosystem thesis is right, Uber isn't just buying cars, it's buying early access to a full energy-to-mobility stack before anyone else locks it up. Again, that's my interpretation, not a confirmed reason from Uber itself. And this is exactly why ecosystems are what actually make companies durable. A single great product can get copied. A full ecosystem, where every layer feeds the next one, and switching out means giving up the whole stack. That's a Moat competitors can't just replicate overnight. That's the Apple playbook, and if Lucid pulls it off, that's the Lucid playbook too. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, okay, but this is still a thesis, right? Yes, let me be straight with you about that. The uranium deal still has a 2-year feasibility study ahead of it, and the outcome could go either direction. And the Lucid Aramco ESS alliance, the Petro to Electro transition, none of that is officially confirmed anywhere. I want to say that again, clearly. That part is my own puzzle, not reported fact. And the nuclear deal itself isn't finished either. It heads to Congress within days, and because the gold standard safeguards were left out, there's a real chance non-proliferation advocates push back hard. So here's the full chain. One line. The uranium deal gives Saudi Arabia power independence that powers AI infrastructure, that grows Saudi Arabia's stake in the ComputeDollar system, and, in my own reading, that same energy build-out is exactly the kind of ecosystem Lucid is trying to sit at the center of, the same way Apple sits at the center of the device ecosystem it built. Once you see this chain, every future headline, nuclear, AI infrastructure, or Lucid, becomes something you can place on the map yourself instead of reacting to it one story at a time. That's what separates someone who spots the pattern early from someone still reading yesterday's news. If this helped connect the dots, hit subscribe and drop a like. And if my thesis turns out right or wrong, I'll be back the moment there's a real earnings call or partnership announcement to test it against. Protect and grow what you've built.